Jaylen Brown just got a ton of money. Is his contract actually as bad as people are saying? Plus, James Harden talks about trades, specifically Damian Lillard. That's kind of weird. Plus, ESPN has power ranked all the teams, and will react and say, you are wrong, ESPN. All today on Locked On NBA. Let's do it.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, y'all. Welcome into another edition of Locked On NBA. You're the best daily podcast covering the association Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers, and with me, a Midwest crossover. Hosting Locked On Bulls, it's Pat the Designer. Pat, how you doing, man? We're in the slow parts of the NBA calendar. Their signings are all two-way deals now. Are you holding up?
Listen, we are excited about any two-way name that comes across because he just might be the next Jordan Poole. But do you really want that? That's the tough part you have to ask yourself.
You never know, man. One day, a two-way guy is going to be like a multi-time All-Star, and then everybody's going to say that about every two-way player signing for the rest of the time.
And that's still Jordan Poole, but do we really want that? You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying.
Well, hey, we're not talking about two-way guys today because Jaylen Brown, big news yesterday. There was a lot of talk about this on Locked On NBA yesterday. 5 years, $300 million extension. We'll talk about that. Is that contract actually bad? The biggest contract in NBA history. Plus, James Harden discusses star trades, but not his own. He talked about Damian Lillard. And at the end, we'll talk about ESPN's new NBA Power Rankings, which, spoiler alert, a team that lost in the first round is ranked 4 spots ahead of the team that beat them. I've got complaints, and we'll get to it all to close out today's show. But we start with Jaylen Brown. I can't believe I'm about to say these numbers out loud, Pat, who just agreed to a 5-year, $304 million contract extension with the Celtics. It does not start till next year. It could be lower than that, depending on what the cap comes in at next year. But it's crazy. It's a huge number. It's the first Supermax of the new CBA, and it's the biggest contract in NBA history. And here's the thing. The discourse has been really weird. Some people are just like, yep, he's amazing. You do it. Some people are like, yo, he's really overrated. This contract's terrible. He is only 26 and was just all NBA. Like, high level, he is good. That's a ton of money, Pat. And I have takes on this. I'm about to do some dorky math. But first, I want you to tell me, do you think this is a good deal, a bad deal? Where do you stand on this contract?
I think it's a twofold street, right? It's a good deal for Jaylen Brown as far as, right, like he's getting this deal now. The money's going to keep going up, right? It's a good deal for Jaylen Brown. Yeah. But, and even if you're a team who Jaylen Brown is your number one, it's a good deal for Jaylen Brown. I think what people are more so irritated by when you look at this Celtics team is these slight changes and variations in the Brown-Tatum matchup that you realize you're going to have to pay $600 and about 50 plus million to keep those two together. And you've now kind of committed yourself to keeping those two together. I think that the situation is more so where people kind of look at this deal for Jaylen Brown, who, I mean, I guess pick your poison. I'd rather have Jason Tatum, but at the end of the day, Jaylen Brown is just as streaky as he are. I believe it was Stephen A who said it best. He said they're just two guys that so happen to wear the same jersey that are both really good players, but they don't play really well together and they don't end up getting the job done together. Do you want to pay 650 plus million for somebody who's not getting the job done together? But I ask all those people, what's the other option? Let Jaylen Brown walk away for nothing?
Yeah, until they have like a bad postseason together,
yeah,
I'll pay it every time, right? Like, I don't think the Celtics were psyched to not make the finals last year, but like they made the conference finals. They had a pretty dang good year. I think they'll take it.
And we're a game away,
right? And they were 2 games away from literally winning the whole thing 2 years ago, right? So, yeah, I think I think the questions for me about the Celtics, especially this coming year, are less about those two and more about the stuff they did around those guys. Like the Smart trade's really interesting, but the value's huge. It is the biggest contract ever in NBA history. Pat, do you remember the last guy that was talked about like that? Do you remember the first guy to sign a big contract in 2016 who had the biggest contract ever for a little bit? If you don't remember, that's good because it'll help prove my point.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm trying to think.
It was Mike Conley. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I do remember that. That's literally that's the perfect way to describe it.
So Mike Conley in 2016, I think it was 5 years, 160 million or something, right? Which is hilariously like nothing now, but well, it's not nothing. You get what I'm saying. And it was the biggest contract ever at the time just because of the new rules, and it was very quickly passed by a million other contracts, and that deal was never bad because that's just how the cap growth works.
Yeah.
And the difference being Conley was older for that one, and so there was like a little worse at the end. Brown's 26. Like even at the end of this, he'll only be 32. So it's fine to me in that way alone, where like next year alone, someone's going to sign for way more than this. And now, Pat, I'll try to keep this fast. I got to be dorky. So 35% of the cap is as high as a player's contract can be in the first year of the deal. And there's a new TV deal coming in 2 years. Not a secret for the NBA. So the league, the expectation mostly from people is the cap's going to grow by 10% every year. Jaylen Brown's raises year over year are only 8% of the first year value of his contract. So his percentage of the cap number actually drops every single year, assuming the league doesn't have like a catastrophic failure of revenue over the life of the deal. The last year of the contract, when he's making $69 million, the salary cap, if it grows 10% a year from now till then, will be $219 million, which is insane. And I apologize for how dorky this is, but that's 31.5% of the cap. For reference, right now, going into this season, the following players are making about that much money. Trae Young, Zach LaVine, Tobias Harris, Anthony Davis, Rudy Gobert, and Klay Thompson. Jaylen Brown is definitely as good as those guys. So, like, to me, like, yeah, it's a huge, ginormous number for a guy who has a lot of passing issues, and, like, his on-court play deserves criticism. But I think for the level of player he is and the percentage of the cap with the way it's going to grow, I think it's fine value-wise. Like, I get why the sticker shock is so high, but I think it's like a fair deal, even given the way the league is trending.
Yeah, and I think here's the one issue it seems like everybody has with Jaylen Brown recently, right? Which I loved. I am one of the nerds that did go back and rewatch the finals games to see kind of, or the ECF games, I should say, to see kind of how it got away from the Celtics. And yes, they struggle going left. But it's not just Jaylen Brown. I implore y'all to go back and watch Jason Tatum. I implore y'all to go back and watch Marcus Smart. Left is a struggle for the Celtics as a whole, but they're 26-year-old NBA players. And I feel like in the mind of a lot of the guys who sit at home on their couch and drink beers while they watch these guys go be super athletes, they go, how can you be in the NBA and not have an ability to go left and make this kind of money? He can improve upon that. You're still going to be sitting on the couch drinking beers, watching him do that. I think that you do it. It comes down to, are you willing to risk it now with the knowledge of, as the NBA continues to get bigger, and by the way, they're not going backwards with money like this. It took COVID-19 for the NBA to go backwards with money. They're not going backwards with money. Are you willing to take the L now and take the criticism when by the end of this, you'll probably be looking at Jaylen Brown's deal and say, we have him on a deal that we can move him to other teams and they will feel comfortable taking him if this blows up in our face. But we're not going to give up on a 26-year-old guy who's helped us get to multiple ECFs.
Yeah, he's good in the deep playoff runs, right? Outside of one stinker game in the finals, he was pretty good in all of them. 34 points in that final game. The Warriors won, so who cares about the stats, right? But he did well. And like, even in the conference finals with Miami, I think the turnovers number is crazy. What did it end up at? Almost 4, but like, still did okay, especially on everything except for threes in that series. Like, he is a good playoff performer. He's gotten them deep. So I would have done that every time for myself, like no hesitation. Even though I get that the number seems like next year, it's going to happen again, right? Like, who are the 2017 draft guys who are going to Tatum, right? For example, Tatum's going to get way more than that next year, and he's better, but you know, the number is going to look huge. And other, like Bam Adebayo could be eligible for Supermax next year, right? Like, I don't think he'll get the whole thing, but very quickly, other guys are going to be eligible for these giant money deals. And you'll go, oh yeah, Jaylen Brown got it. Like, it'll be an afterthought, like Conley to me, pretty quick. And I think the Celtics were right to do it. We'll see though. The thing that makes it maybe bad that I haven't talked about, that neither of us have, is the new second apron. That's eventually just going to kick them in the pants. They're going to go, hey, you can't afford this team, guys. We'll see if that ends up mattering. So their window is longer now, but their like actual peak with this current roster, that window might be shorter. That window might only be like the next 2 years. We'll see.
And the biggest question is, right, did other teams defensively just figure out the Celtics because
Maybe
of what
so.
Miami did? Like, that's the real question that probably has most people like, are we really doing this? Like,
and maybe Porzingis is the answer. We'll see. That's a different conversation. But
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
No comment.
Porzingis is the answer.
We'll
I feel like people haven't said since New York, so that was interesting.
Look, man, we're talking about the Celtics. I'll throw them a bone. Lots of interesting stuff. Locked on Celtics to listen to. James Harden said some stuff about star trades, which is pretty funny because he is potentially in one. I don't know if you've been paying attention, Pat. Let's talk about that stuff because he talked about Damian Lillard, which is wild. Before we do that, though, I want to quickly tell you guys about FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel. Get 10 times your first bet amount and bonus bets up to $200. That's a lot of money. That's right. Just bet $20, you'll win $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the next home run. Could be any number of players. Trade deadline is coming for baseball, and you could do all of that on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. That's pretty fast. So there's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. We're back here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. The Bulls signed a two-way player, so go check out Pat on Locked On Bulls for more on that and the Bulls off season, which has, to me, actually been pretty good, although they are definitely in a precarious spot heading into this season.
We don't have a Jaylen Brown contract.
A lot riding on the Bulls' first 30 games of this season, Pat. That's all I will say about the team that you cover. Speaking of teams you don't cover, let's talk about what James Harden had to say. He was interviewed by USA Today about various topics. One of his first on-the-record interviews of the summer since opting in to his contract with the Sixers. And everybody wants to hear what James Harden has to say about his own trade. He didn't really talk about that much, but he was asked about Damian Lillard, funnily enough, and in general, the whole landscape of star trades and things like that. And he was asked about Lillard's trade request. Now, let's be clear about the quote I'm about to read. James Harden has also reportedly requested a trade and also reportedly has a preferred destination. Let me be very clear about the context of what I'm about to say. Here's what James Harden said about Damian Lillard's trade request. He said, I see both sides of it. I see both sides because I went, funny past tense there, through it. The organization doesn't want to just give a player that basically is one of the best players that they've ever had away for nothing. So I get the organization side and I get the player side as far as wanting to play or be somewhere. Funnily enough, Pat, that's a pretty good answer to me to understand the whole situation and to go, look, I get players wanting to be where they want, but organizations have to do what's best for them. But to me, still, just given the landscape of how this is all going with players wanting to be in a specific spot despite being under contract somewhere else, it all just hits a little hollow sometimes, even though I get exactly what he's saying.
He's not wrong, but it's just like, I don't know if you're the guy to be the one to come out and say it that way, right? Like, is this the same guy?
He's the only one probably in the whole league who isn't qualified, right?
You know what I mean? Like, is this the same guy that showed up like 70 pounds overweight and then instantly was jacked again the second he got to his desired destination, which, by the way, killed all other trade conversations because everybody was like, well, we don't want fat Harden. We wanted regular Harden. I mean, like, I get what he's saying. And yes, at the end of the day, as much as it sucks and as much as we would like for everybody to just go out and do the honorable thing, the Portland Trail Blazers have a business to think about. They can't just take Tyler Hero, some second round picks, a piece of bubble gum, and Pat Riley's signed picture. That's not enough back in a trade deal. And so there has to be something that's worth trading Dame for. But again, right, like James Harden, I also love the fact that you pointed this out. Like, he's talking about this in the past tense. Like, he's not trying to go to the Clippers right now for basically nothing. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Harden is by far the most interesting player. He reminds me of so many of those 90s end of era players that were like, I want a ring. I'm still good enough to go out and contribute to a team, but I'm tired. Like I'm just tired. I don't want to do it anymore. Like I want a ring though. You know what I mean? Like he's like Barkley when he was on Houston at the end. You're just like, what's he doing here? I don't know. He plays basketball.
Yeah, the thing about and this applies to Harden too. I talked about this a little bit on Locked On NBA earlier this week, but in both situations with Harden and Dame, like I get why it's weird and it's talked about the way it is, where it just feels like teams are getting screwed, but like everyone involved is doing exactly what they should do, right? For a Dame situations, like the Heat know that they're his favorite team, so they should lowball Portland, and Portland should say no and act in their best interest. And Dame's agent should be trying to help his client get where he wants because that's his job.
Yeah.
He represents Dame. So like they're all doing what they're supposed to, and maybe that sucks for the league and for some fans, but like you can't fault anyone for doing that. It's not some crisis. Everybody's doing their job. And that's the same thing too with Harden's situation, albeit to a much lesser degree from a contract perspective. It's like Harden doesn't want to play for Philly anymore. And the best way for him to get paid a reasonable amount, but not play for Philly, was actually to opt in, weirdly enough. And now it makes sense for him to try to get where he wants and his agent to try to get him. That's his job. And it makes sense for Philly to have a high price, and it makes sense for the Clippers to not offer anything because they think they're the favorites. So that all, it makes it weird the way people talk about it. Like that isn't the case. Like, oh, this is some giant problem for the, what are the Blazers doing? Just take the offer. It's like, no, do your job. But it's funny to hear Harden be so all seeing about it since he's so involved. And it's fun to get that perspective. And I'm glad that USA Today was able to ask it under the guise of Damian Lillard, even though it clearly also applies to James Harden. He also said more later. This one is definitely more Dame specific. He said, that person has done so many great things for your organization, your franchise, but then you don't want to give that player away for nothing. So I get both sides. Just find a balance, meet in the middle, and hopefully both sides can come to an agreement. Obviously, Harden does not have that level of impact with Philly specifically because he played there for one season, but Dame clearly does. And I do think that his conclusion is going to be what happens in both situations. Some sort of meeting in the middle will happen because it kind of has to, or else these situations will become untenable, and meeting in the middle does kind of suck for star trades, but I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a situation now where I feel like they're waiting to see if like anybody else wants to get into the mix. Like I wouldn't be surprised. I said this, I want to say I said this on Locked On NBA last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. I don't know. It feels like the Dame saga has been never ending. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that lingers into the season because Portland's not just going to give Dame away for nothing. Like it doesn't have to go all the way to the trade deadline, but there's going to have to be something else involved, which means there's probably going to have to be some other team involved because again, Miami, the things that we thought about Miami possibly giving away, those players have gone away. Those players left after the finals run. And so, the Max Struses, the Gabe Vincents, those were the names that we thought were going to be included in a deal like this. And those names are no longer there. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of if this does get done in the offseason. If another team at this point is just like, please, let's just get something done so that we can finally start signing some of these guys that we're like, where the heck are they going? Christian Wood's still on the market. Nobody knows what's going on with them. Like,
yeah, Kelly Oubre is just like, yo, can we figure this out, guys? Like, I want to know.
I want a contract too. That's always the best part, isn't it? Like all of a sudden, like whenever the big fish is of the offseason, then there's like 30 deals in a day. And it's like, oh, okay, all right, that works.
Well, I get it. It's funny because like if you're Kelly Oubre, I'm just guessing, but like the Mavs are probably the best situation left for him right now. But let's say the Heat trade away like 6 players for Dame, like he could start.
Yeah,
he could start like that. That's pretty nice. So yeah, I get waiting for him, and we'll see where this all shakes out. My guess, I don't know how you feel about this, is both of them get done either right before training camp or right after the beginning of a very awkward training camp, which is still 2 months away. So I think we got some time to come. I don't know how you feel about it, but on the Harden Dame fronts as we progress forward. Any other thoughts here, or should we move on to the first someone trying to make me mad power rankings of the offseason?
let's move on. I don't think I've ever seen Mad Tony East. The stressed Tony East I've seen. I don't know if I've seen Mad Tony East.
We'll talk about it. Let's get to it to close out today's show. Thanks, y'all, for making Locked On NBA your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Spurs. Why? Because they're the last team I can remember making a signing, which was Don Barlow earlier today, and they have Victor Wembanyama, which is pretty sick. Jeff Garcia will have the latest on the San Antonio Spurs for you over at Locked On Spurs. ESPN kills it with this in the offseason, Pat. They put out just little things every once a week or so that you can talk about or react to or discuss. Their top 100 list, this project, all sorts of stuff. And they were first to it with NBA Power Rankings on July 27th, because who needs rankings when there's no games for 2 months? Well, I need rankings when there's new games for 2 months. And it bakes in off-season moves. And we're going to complain about some stuff today. The top 8 teams I feel pretty good about. They have the Warriors, Lakers, 76ers, Heat, Suns, Celtics, Bucks, and Nuggets in the top 8. And then they get me. They get me, Pat. 9th on the ESPN's Power Rankings list is the Cleveland Cavaliers. What a good summer. Max Strus and George Niang will help that team quite a bit. 13th on ESPN's Power Ranking list is the New York Knicks, who also got better. They got DiVincenzo. The Knicks just stomped the Cavs in the first round, if I recall, a few weeks ago. I hate that the Cavs are ahead. The games have to matter. I don't think the Cavs summer was that much better. That is my first thing I'm mad about. Am I crazy, or did the Cavs get way better and I'm not giving them enough credit?
I don't know if the Cavs got way better, but I think the Cavs were the Cavs, to me, even though they got beat, are still a team that is trying to figure out where they're going. And they were a really good basketball team this season.
They got embarrassed.
They did. No, 100%. But I think at the same time, right, like, we just know what the Knicks are. Yeah. And so there's still some unknown with the Cavs. I think that's why they land a little bit higher on this power ranking. There's no unknown with what the Knicks are. Even with Dante DiVincenzo, guess what? It's going to be an angry Tom Thibodeau. It's going to be Julius Randle, who is the anti Jaylen Brown, right? He can go nothing but left. And then, and it's going to be like a pick and roll. And you're going to be like, Jalen Brunson, save us. And Cleveland's kind of that same team, except they got a better version of Jalen Brunson and some other guys that are pretty good too. I don't have an issue with Cleveland being above the Knicks, because I think at the end of the day, with a lot of this NBA stuff, one team in one season to the next season, like the Knicks were a terrible team 2 seasons ago, and now they're back into the top 15 in the power rankings.
It's true. All right, what do you hate about this or love about this?
I'm gonna be honest with you. Oklahoma City at 15,
pretty high.
I understand we're excited. I understand the hype is there. If you're putting them 15 just because of Shea, I almost can go with that. But it is a lot of expectation on an Oklahoma City team in a Western Conference that is still really, really good. And I just don't know if Chet Holmgren is going to be that piece that just vaults them to one of the best teams in the NBA overall. Now, I do think that they're going to be a better team. I really like how that team is constructed. I love the young pieces on that team, and I really do expect them to be better this season. But top 15 from the Western Conference play-in is a long way.
I like Chet a lot. Like, I think he's going to be really good. Here's the thing. He hasn't played an NBA game yet. and rookies usually aren't very good in the NBA. With absolutely no shade to Chet, I think he'll be good and be in the Rookie of the Year mix. Like, I still think he'll probably be like an even at best impact player, likely slightly negative. That's just how it is. That's not a shot at Chet. That's just how rookies are. Like, Banchero was amazing last year as a scorer, and even he was like a barely positive player because of his defense and all this other stuff. Like, it's just how it is for rookies. And I think Chet's going to be amazing one day. But I mean, it's been talked about a lot with the Thunder that, like, he's this big addition for them. It's going to change their team, and he's good, and he will at one day. But I don't know if this year is the year. The Kings are at 12, Pat. The Sacramento Kings are at 12. Last I checked, they were pretty good last year. They were the 3 seed in the West. They are behind the Clippers, who they were better than. the Grizzlies, who are going to be without their best player for a third of the season, the
Yeah.
Warriors, who they were better than, and almost beat. Who knows if De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis don't break their thumbs. I don't know exactly where I'd put them, but I'd put them higher than 12. I'm not outraged about that, though, because I don't love the Kings offseason. I just wanted to give them some love for their good season, which feels like it's been last year. After that, I think my next whining, complaining, the Jazz at 20 seems too high. That team doesn't feel like a team that wants to get better. I feel like they want to be a little worse than that. That's my two next ones. What else stands out to you?
I was going kind of the same spot as you with the Kings, but I was going to say that I kind of feel like the Kings are that weird anomaly team because is there going to be defense on that team?
Keep going.
Is there going to be defense on that team next season?
Yeah.
And here's why I say that. Remember, that Warriors series, we were on here talking about if they can just find a little bit of consistency defensively, that Kings team could be a top 5 team in this power rankings because there's not many teams on this list that literally can go out there and just say, we're going to put up 145 on you, and we're going to ask you if you can just outscore us. And we saw that consistently last season when that Kings team would just go out and be able to put up offense night in and night out, best offense in the NBA, but literally the worst defense in the NBA. If they can just be a little bit better, I think that Kings team could vault its way up to a top 5 spot in the NBA, especially on these NBA power rankings. So I would say keep an eye on that team. Maybe I'd probably say 12 is okay for them right now. But if we're going off the hope theory with Oklahoma City, I'm going off the hope theory with the Sacramento Kings too, that I think that they'll be a little bit better defensively coming into this season.
Yeah, they're interesting. Maybe I'm just baking in that they had one of my least favorite off seasons, and
yeah,
I get why they did what they did. Like, especially when you don't make the playoffs for whatever it was, 17, 18 years. Like, okay, keep that team together. Like, your fans earned that. Like, do that. I think that's good reasoning. I wish they were a little more creative with their space or brought in a little more talent. I get it. You can't lose Sabonis. Like, I get it, but would like to see a little bit more there. I'm surprised you didn't go for your Bulls at 22. I mean, even if you don't like the Bulls, I like the Bulls summer. I think Torrey Craig's going to help them, and they got some defenders, and mostly the same team is back, and Pat Williams should be better, and they got him behind the Pacers and the Jazz and the Nets. I mean, that's pretty surprising to me, even if you're not high on the Bulls.
There's too many question marks on that team. Pat Williams should be better. Pat Williams should have been better this season. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's kind of the main question there, right? Like, Pat Williams yes, he's the 4th pick in the draft. Guess what? How's Tyrese Halliburton? He looks real nice. You know what I mean? Like, so
yes, he does.
I look at this Bulls team, not to say that I think that they'll end up. I actually think the Bulls will have a better season this year. I think that when you look at this Bulls team, they added Javon Carter, who at a minimum, and this is all I said, go out and find somebody who's better than Patrick Beverley. He's better than Patrick Beverley. When the Bulls had Pat Bev on the team, even though they were 8 points worse with Pat Bev on the team, the defensive metrics did jump, and they still won 14 games with a real point guard in that system. Zach LaVine has been a 25-plus point per game scorer, and the Bulls have won 61% of their games. So I like the moves that the Bulls made, but I think when you're playing the continuity game, very similar to even some of those teams at the top, very similar to a Boston Celtics team, right? The Milwaukee Bucks. When you're playing the continuity game, you have to show me. And when that happens, you got to kind of just go based on the season. I like the addition of Torrey Craig. I think that I'll say this, Unalot Bidham seems like he's going to be able to come over and provide some 3-point shooting. I'm not going to allow y'all to hype up Vasily Miksic, and I'm not going to hype up Unalot Bidham. We don't know what either of these guys are going to do at the NBA level over here, but I think he's going to provide some 3-point shooting. And this Bulls team by the top could be a top 5 seed in the East. I wouldn't be surprised by that, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they're fighting between that 6th and 8th range because once again, injuries take place and we're struggling to fight our way through.
That makes sense. In general, I actually think this order is pretty good for most of these teams, given how I feel about most of the summers in the NBA, but those teams stood out to me as like, I am just personally really high on the Pelicans, and they still have Zion on their roster. If he plays, that's the problem. He never plays.
I know Washington,
but I get why they're where they are.
I know Washington is Washington, but like Are we a little too low on Washington? Like,
Yeah, I
Kuz,
think
Jordan Poole, and Tyus Jones isn't the worst that you could have done.
Poole, Jones, Kuzma, Avdia, Gafford is like, that's like an okay 5. After that, it's like the big nosedive. But
I mean, yeah, but
no, they should not be the second worst team. I agree. They'll
I
be
don't
better
know.
than
That's
the Hornets.
that's the only one. At the end of the day, everyone looks miserable in Washington. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Everybody looks
funny when it's
miserable.
like Poole and Kuzma competing to be the highest scorer, and like they're down by 20 in the fourth quarter. I grew up a Wizards fan. I'm allowed to complain about this stuff. Check it out on ESPN. A lot of their beat writers and NBA staff got involved in the project, and in general, again, like I said, pretty good. Or check out USA Today for James Harden's interview, or anywhere that covers the Celtics for the latest on Jaylen Brown and everything we talked about today. Tomorrow, Wes Goldberg, Adam Mares with the latest from around the association and their Friday power rankings of whatever topic. Check out Locked On Bulls for more from Pat, or Locked On Pacers for more from me. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow.